The Vampire King's daughter screamed every morning when servants tried to brush her hair. But when new maid Elena discovered tiny silver thorns growing from the girl's scalp punishment magic from a rival court, she realized the daily torture was slowly killing the heir to the throne. Elena pressed her face against the frostbitten window of the carriage as Drakmoor Castle emerged from the mist like a sleeping giant carved from black stone. The driver refused to meet her eyes when she paid him, muttering prayers under his breath as he whipped his horses back toward the village. She clutched her single bag tighter, knowing there was nowhere else to go. Her village of Millhaven lay in ashes 3 days behind her, destroyed by raiders who left nothing but smoke and graves. The Vampire King's castle offered the only employment for miles, even if the locals crossed themselves when they spoke of it. Elena had heard the whispers about the cursed princess and the servants who vanished, but desperation made even dangerous work seem like salvation. Mrs. Blackwood met her at the servants' entrance, a woman whose steel-gray hair matched her unforgiving expression. The head servant's hands bore old scars that looked like claw marks, and her voice carried the weight of authority earned through decades of survival. She led Elena through corridors lined with portraits of long-dead nobles whose painted eyes seemed to track their movement. The castle smelled of old stone, beeswax candles, and something metallic that made Elena's skin crawl. Other servants scurried past with their heads down, avoiding eye contact as if fear had become their natural state. Mrs. Blackwood's tour was brief and harsh, ending with a simple warning that Elena would soon learn to take seriously. Stay away from the princess's wing, especially during the morning hours, or join the others who had simply walked out the gates one night and never returned. The screaming started at dawn, just as Mrs. Blackwood had warned. Elena jolted awake in her narrow servant's bed, heart hammering as inhuman shrieks echoed through the castle walls. The sound held such pure agony that it made her teeth ache and her eyes water. She pressed her hands over her ears, but the princess's pain seemed to seep through stone and bone alike. Other servants moved through their morning duties with the practiced numbness of soldiers who had learned to function through trauma. Cook prepared breakfast while tears streamed down her face. The stable boy fed the horses with shaking hands. Even the castle's ancient butler, a vampire named Grimwald, who had served the Drakmoor family for 3 centuries, flinched each time the screams peaked. Elena found herself drawn toward the princess's wing, despite every instinct screaming at her to run. She crept through tapestry-lined hallways until she reached a heavy oak door where 2 guards stood like statues, their faces carved from marble and pain. Through a crack in the door, she glimpsed a scene that would haunt her dreams. Princess Liralee knelt in the center of an opulent bedchamber, while 3 servants attempted to brush her waist-length black hair. But her hair moved like a living thing, writhing and coiling as if each strand contained its own malevolent spirit. Tiny silver thorns protruded from her scalp, each one catching the morning light like miniature daggers. When a servant's brush touched one of the thorns, the princess's scream could have shattered glass. Her pale skin bore the gray pallor of someone slowly dying, and her amber eyes held the haunted look of a creature trapped in perpetual torment. The Vampire King stood in the shadows of his daughter's chamber, and Elena's breath caught at the sight of him. King Valdric possessed the terrible beauty of his kind, with platinum hair that fell to his shoulders and features sharp enough to cut. But grief had carved deep lines around his crimson eyes, and his hands trembled as he watched his child suffer. He was perhaps the most powerful creature in the known world, capable of commanding armies and bending reality to his will, yet he stood helpless as his daughter died by degrees. When the servants finally gave up their futile attempts and fled the room, the king approached his daughter with infinite gentleness. He gathered her in his arms like she was made of spun glass, rocking her as she sobbed against his chest. Elena had never seen anything more heartbreaking than this ancient predator reduced to a grieving father. That afternoon, Elena cornered Mrs. Blackwood in the castle's vast kitchen, pressing for answers despite the older woman's obvious reluctance to speak. The head servant's face went ashen when Elena described the silver thorns, and she quickly made the sign against evil. Those weren't natural growths, Mrs. Blackwood whispered, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. They were punishment magic, designed by enemies who wanted to destroy the royal family slowly and publicly. Each thorn drained a little more of the princess's life force, feeding on her vampiric regeneration until it would eventually burn out completely. The curse was ingenious in its cruelty because it forced the king to watch his heir waste away while being powerless to help her. Mrs. Blackwood's voice dropped to barely a whisper as she revealed that 17 servants had tried to help the princess over the past year. Some had simply vanished in the night, leaving behind empty beds and no trace. Others had been found in the morning with their minds shattered, babbling about silver thorns that had somehow transferred to their own bodies before disappearing again. Elena spent her first week learning the castle's routines, while the morning screams became a horrible constant in her life. She noticed how the servants moved in careful patterns, avoiding certain corridors and speaking in hushed tones about the princess they called the cursed child. The vampire king rarely appeared during daylight hours, but Elena caught glimpses of him prowling the halls at night like a caged wolf. His presence filled the castle with tension that made everyone jumpy and short-tempered. Even the other vampires among the staff gave their king a wide berth, sensing the dangerous edge to his grief. Elena learned to recognize the signs that preceded the princess's worst episodes. Birds would stop singing outside her windows, the temperature would drop several degrees, and a smell like burning metal would drift through the corridors. The forbidden discovery came on her 8th night at Drakmoor, when Elena's conscience finally overrode her self-preservation instincts. She had lain awake listening to Princess Lyralei's sobs echoing from her chambers, unable to ignore the sound of someone her own age dying alone in agony. Elena slipped from her bed and navigated the dark corridors by memory, avoiding the night guards who patrolled in predictable patterns. The princess's door stood slightly ajar, as if even the castle itself couldn't bear to fully contain such suffering. Elena pushed it open and stepped into a nightmare made manifest. Princess Lirelei sat before an ornate mirror, her reflection showing the true extent of her deterioration. She was 16 years old but looked ancient, with hollow cheeks and dark circles under eyes that burned with fever. Her famous beauty had been reduced to sharp angles and translucent skin that revealed the network of veins beneath. The silver thorns covering her scalp had grown longer and more numerous since Elena's first glimpse, creating a crown of agony that pulsed with malevolent energy. When the princess noticed Elena's reflection in the mirror, she didn't startle or call for guards. Instead, she simply smiled, with the weary acceptance of someone who had moved beyond fear. Elena approached slowly, hands raised to show she meant no harm. Up close, the thorns revealed their true nature as works of sophisticated magic rather than natural growths. Each one bore tiny inscriptions in a language that hurt to look at directly, symbols that seemed to writhe and shift when Elena tried to focus on them. The thorns weren't just growing from the princess's scalp, they were actively burrowing deeper, seeking to reach her brain and complete whatever dark purpose they served. Princess Lyralei's voice was barely a whisper when she spoke, rough from screaming and weak from months of torment. She begged Elena not to tell her father what she had seen, not to add to his burden of helpless rage. The princess understood more about politics than a 16-year-old should, recognizing that these thorns were designed to provoke exactly the response they were getting from the vampire king. The terrible truth emerged as Elena examined the thorns more closely, using skills learned from her grandmother, who had been the village healer. The symbols matched descriptions from old texts about the Shadowmere court, the vampire kingdom that had warred with Drakmoor for centuries. This was punishment magic at its most sophisticated, designed not just to kill but to destroy through psychological warfare. The curse would continue draining Princess Lyralei's life while forcing her father to choose between watching her die slowly or launching a war that would devastate both kingdoms. Elena realized she was looking at a weapon more dangerous than any sword or army, one that turned a parent's love into a tool of destruction. Princess Lirelei confirmed Elena's fears with the matter-of-fact tone of someone who had accepted her fate. She had been cursed 6 months ago during a diplomatic mission to neutral territory, struck down by Shadowmere agents who vanished before her guards could react. Since then, she had been dying by degrees while her father grew more desperate and violent with each passing day. The king's advisors whispered about preemptive strikes and total war, unable to see that such responses would only give Shadowmere exactly what they wanted. The princess understood that her death might be the price of peace, but she also knew her father would never accept such a sacrifice. Elena found herself face to face with a political nightmare disguised as a curse, where every possible solution led to catastrophe. As dawn approached, and Elena prepared to slip back to her quarters, Princess Lirelei caught her hand with fingers cold as winter stone. The touch sent a shock through Elena that had nothing to do with vampiric power and everything to do with the desperate hope she saw in those amber eyes. The princess had been alone with her agony for so long that even a stranger's kindness felt like salvation. She made Elena promise to return, to sit with her during the long nights when the pain made sleep impossible. Elena agreed without hesitation, not yet understanding that this simple act of compassion would set in motion events that would reshape both kingdoms and awaken powers she never knew she possessed. Elena's hands trembled as she sat beside Princess Lirelei in the moonlit chamber, gathering courage to reveal the truth that had defined her entire life. The princess had grown stronger over the past week, their nightly conversations providing a balm to her suffering that no medicine could match. But Elena knew that words alone would not be enough to break the curse, and the time for secrets had passed. She took a shuddering breath and began to speak about her mother Serafina, a woman whose very name had been forbidden in Elena's village. Serafina had been more than a simple healer, Elena whispered. She had been a sorceress of extraordinary power, whose gifts could mend broken bones with a touch and cure diseases that baffled the wisest physicians. But magic always came with a price, and Serafina's compassion had led her to practice forbidden arts that the local lords deemed too dangerous to tolerate. Elena was only 7 when the soldiers came for her mother, dragging Serafina from their cottage while she screamed warnings about the binding spell she had placed on her daughter to keep her safe. The villagers watched in silence as they burned the woman who had saved so many of their children, their fear of magic stronger than their gratitude for her healing touch. Elena had spent the next 11 years believing herself fully human, the binding spell successfully suppressing any trace of her supernatural heritage. But something about Princess Lirelei's proximity had begun awakening powers that Elena thought were lost forever. She could feel energy humming beneath her skin when she touched the princess's hand, a warm golden light that seemed to respond to Lirelei's pain with an urgent need to heal. The princess listened with wide amber eyes, her pale fingers gripping Elena's as the truth poured out in whispered confessions. Elena explained how she had always been able to sense illness in others, how plants seemed to grow stronger when she tended them, how small cuts healed unusually quickly on her own body. These had been dismissed as coincidences or good fortune, but now Elena understood they were echoes of her suppressed heritage fighting to break free. Princess Lirelei's vampiric nature was somehow unraveling the binding spell, like a key turning in a lock that had been sealed for too long. The princess's response was not fear or suspicion, but overwhelming relief that someone with actual power might finally be able to help her. She urged Elena to try using her awakening abilities on the silver thorns, desperate enough to risk any consequences. Elena's first attempt was clumsy and dangerous, her untrained power lashing out like wild lightning when she pressed her palms against the princess's scalp. The moment her skin made contact with the cursed thorns, agony shot through both their bodies as if they had been struck by the same blade. Elena's vision went white with pain, while Liralay's scream could have shattered every window in the castle. But for just an instant, Elena felt the curse's true nature. A living malevolence that pulsed with hatred and fed on suffering like a parasite. The backlash threw Elena across the room while the princess convulsed on her bed, silver light pouring from the thorns as they reacted to the unexpected challenge. When Elena struggled to her feet, she realized with horror that the curse had learned from their attack, the thorns now glowing with a defensive energy that would make future attempts even more dangerous. Princess Lirelei lay unconscious for 3 hours, while Elena paced the chamber in growing panic, terrified that her reckless healing attempt had made everything worse. When the princess finally opened her eyes, she reported that the curse felt different now, more aggressive and aware, as if it had developed a personal vendetta against Elena specifically. They had discovered that the silver thorns were not just magical constructs, but possessed a form of consciousness that could adapt and evolve to counter any threat. This revelation changed everything, transforming their fight from a simple healing challenge into a battle of wits against an intelligent enemy that grew stronger with each encounter. King Valdric noticed the change in his daughter immediately, his predatory instincts honed by centuries of reading subtle shifts in behavior and emotion. Princess Lirelei had always been pale and withdrawn, but lately there was a spark in her amber eyes that he had not seen since before the curse took hold. She moved with more purpose, spoke with greater animation, and most tellingly, she had stopped asking him to end her suffering permanently. The king's relief was tempered by suspicion as he began investigating what had caused this miraculous improvement in his daughter's condition. His inquiries led him to Elena, the newest servant who had somehow gained access to the princess's chambers, despite strict orders that only the most trusted staff be allowed near her. King Valdric summoned his spymaster Lord Thorn, a vampire of ancient lineage whose talents for uncovering secrets had served the crown for over 2 centuries. Lord Thorn's pale eyes glittered with interest as he accepted the assignment to investigate Elena's background, his network of informants spreading across the kingdom like invisible threads. Within days, Lord Thorn returned with information that made the king's blood run cold. Elena was not the simple village girl she appeared to be, but the daughter of Seraphina the Lightbringer, a sorceress whose legend had haunted vampire courts for decades. Seraphina had once served the Shadowmere court as a healer and advisor, her powers rivaling those of the greatest vampire lords. But she had defected during the last Great War, stealing secrets and weakening Shadowmere's magical defenses before vanishing into the human world. Her betrayal had cost Queen Morgatha thousands of lives and turned the tide of battle in Drakmoor's favor. The implications were staggering because if Elena had inherited even a fraction of her mother's power, she represented both the greatest hope for curing his daughter and the greatest potential threat to his kingdom. King Valdric found himself torn between gratitude for Elena's positive effect on Princess Lirelei and terror that she might be a Shadowmere agent sent to complete her mother's work from within his own castle. The vampire king began watching Elena carefully, noting how his daughter smiled when the human girl entered her chambers and how the princess's pain seemed to lessen in Elena's presence. Lord Thorn advised caution and suggested interrogating Elena under magical compulsion to determine her true loyalties. But King Valdric hesitated because his daughter was happier than she had been in months. The king witnessed their growing friendship through magical surveillance, observing as Elena shared stories of the outside world that fascinated his sheltered daughter, Princess. Lirelei had spent her entire life within castle walls, her royal status and vampiric nature making normal human interaction impossible. Elena's tales of village festivals, market days, and simple human joys opened new worlds for the princess, painting pictures of a life beyond the isolation of royal duty. The king watched his daughter laugh for the first time in months as Elena described a particularly chaotic harvest celebration, her amber eyes bright with genuine mirth. These moments of happiness made King Valdric's decision even more complicated because Elena was clearly providing something his daughter needed desperately, even as her bloodline marked her as potentially dangerous. Elena and Princess Lyrelei spent weeks developing a strategy to combat the curse, combining Elena's awakening sorceress abilities with ancient vampire healing rituals that Lyrelei had studied in her extensive education. The princess proved to be remarkably knowledgeable about magical theory, her royal tutoring having included comprehensive instruction in supernatural arts and defenses. They discovered that vampire regeneration followed specific patterns that could be enhanced through ritual magic, while Elena's healing power seemed to operate on completely different principles that complemented rather than conflicted with vampiric abilities. Their plan required careful timing and precise execution because the curse had demonstrated its ability to adapt to their attacks. They would need to strike multiple thorns simultaneously before the curse could mount a coordinated defense, using Elena's power to disrupt the magical bonds, while Lirelei channeled her vampiric regeneration to prevent the backlash from causing permanent damage. The preparation took weeks of careful study and practice, during which Elena's abilities continued to strengthen and evolve. She learned to see the curse's energy patterns like glowing threads wrapped around the silver thorns, each strand pulsing with malevolent purpose. Princess Lyrelei taught her basic protection spells and energy manipulation techniques, knowledge that had been passed down through generations of vampire royalty. Their first major attempt began at midnight, when magical energies were strongest, and the curse's defenses might be weakened. Elena placed her hands on either side of Liralei's head, while the princess entered a meditative trance that would allow her to direct her regenerative powers with surgical precision. They targeted 3 thorns that seemed less heavily defended, Elena's golden healing light clashing against the curse's silver malevolence in a battle of opposing forces. The struggle lasted nearly an hour, both women pouring their strength into the effort as pain lanced through their connected minds. When the first thorn finally dissolved, the victory felt like breaking through a dam, the curse's defenses cracking as Elena's power found its rhythm. The second and third thorns followed in rapid succession, their destruction sending waves of relief through Princess Lyralei's tortured nervous system. But their triumph was short-lived as the curse retaliated with unprecedented fury, sending psychic screams through the castle that drove several servants permanently mad. Cook was found the next morning rocking in a corner of the kitchen, babbling about silver thorns growing from her own scalp. 2 stable boys fled into the forest and were never seen again, while the ancient butler Grimwald collapsed with his mind shattered, requiring magical intervention to prevent his complete mental breakdown. The psychic backlash reached far beyond Drakmoor Castle, sending ripples of magical disturbance across both kingdoms like earthquake tremors. In the Shadowmere court, Queen Morgatha felt the disturbance through her mystical connections to the curse, her crimson eyes blazing with rage as she realized someone was actively fighting her masterwork. The Sorceress Queen immediately began mobilizing her forces, calling in ancient debts and activating sleeper agents who had waited years for this moment. Elena watched in growing horror as reports arrived of Shadowmere armies massing on the borders, their movement too coordinated to be coincidental. She realized that their success in destroying 3 thorns had triggered the very war that Princess Lirelei had feared, forcing King Valdric into the impossible position of defending his kingdom while his daughter remained vulnerable to attack. Time was running out faster than Elena had ever imagined, and their next attempt to break the curse would have to be their last before the armies of both kingdoms clashed in a conflict that could destroy everything they were fighting to save. And now's the time to stop and subscribe to our channel. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. It's always amazing to see how far these tales travel across the world. Now let's continue. Queen Morgatha arrived at Drakmoor Castle like a storm given form, her crimson and black banners snapping in winds that seemed to blow from otherworldly realms. The ancient sorceress had not set foot on Drakmoor soil for 3 centuries, but desperation and fury had driven her to this unprecedented diplomatic gesture. Elena watched from Princess Liralay's window as the Shadowmere procession approached the main gates, their vampire guards moving with predatory grace, while dark magic crackled around their mistress like visible hatred. Queen Morgatha rode a horse that appeared to be carved from living shadow, its eyes burning with the same crimson fire that danced around her pale fingers. She was beautiful in the way that avalanches were beautiful, terrible and inevitable, and utterly destructive. Her raven-black hair flowed like liquid night, while her porcelain features held the cold perfection of someone who had transcended mortality so completely that humanity became a distant memory. King Valdric met his ancient enemy at the castle's great hall, both rulers surrounded by their most trusted advisors and elite guards who watched each other with barely contained violence. The tension in the air was so thick it seemed to press against Elena's skin as she hid behind a tapestry, desperate to hear what would determine Princess Liralay's fate. Queen Morgatha's voice carried the authority of centuries when she finally spoke, her words echoing through the hall like pronouncements from a vengeful goddess. She had come under a flag of truce to reveal truths that would reshape everything Elena thought she understood about the curse. The silver thorns were not merely instruments of torture or slow death, but something far more insidious and brilliant in their cruel design. They were magical leashes that would transform Princess Liralay into Morgatha's unwilling puppet, if allowed to complete their work, her mind gradually consumed until only an obedient shell remained. But if the princess died before the mental domination was complete, the curse would transfer to her father, binding King Valdric to Shadowmere's will, with chains forged from his own grief and desperation. Elena felt her blood turn to ice as the true scope of Morgatha's plan became clear, a trap that had been decades in the making and offered no escape through any conventional means. The sorceress queen explained with obvious pleasure how she had studied the Drakmoor family for generations, learning their weaknesses and the bonds of love that could be twisted into instruments of control. She had waited patiently for the perfect moment to strike, choosing Princess Liralay not because she was the heir, but because she was her father's greatest vulnerability. Queen Morgatha revealed that breaking the curse completely required a willing sacrifice of royal vampire blood, specifically that King Valdric must choose to die so that his daughter could live free. The alternative was watching Liralay's mind slowly consumed until she became a weapon pointed at her own kingdom's heart. Elena realized with growing horror that this had always been the endgame, a choice designed to destroy the Drakmoor bloodline through impossible decisions rather than honest warfare. Queen Morgatha's crimson eyes glittered with malicious satisfaction as she watched King Valdric's face cycle through rage, despair, and helpless fury. She had crafted a masterpiece of psychological warfare that turned a parent's love into their greatest weakness, forcing the vampire king to choose between his own existence and his daughter's freedom. The sorceress queen made it clear that she would wait exactly 7 days for his decision, after which the curse would accelerate its work until Princess Lyralay's transformation became irreversible. Elena pressed her hand against her mouth to stifle a gasp as the full implications crashed over her like a tidal wave of despair. Every attempt to heal the princess had actually been playing into Morgatha's hands, providing data about their capabilities while pushing the curse toward its final evolution. The 3 thorns they had destroyed had been allowed to fall as part of the greater strategy, demonstrating the futility of resistance while gathering information about Elena's awakening powers. Queen Morgatha's gaze seemed to pierce through walls and tapestries as she mentioned the half-blood sorceress who had been interfering with her work, her voice carrying a note of amused condescension that made Elena's skin crawl. The ancient vampire knew exactly who Elena was and where she was hiding, but chose to let her remain free for reasons that were surely part of some larger game. As the Shadowmere delegation prepared to depart, Queen Morgatha delivered one final revelation that shattered Elena's understanding of her own heritage. Seraphina the Lightbringer had not defected from Shadowmere by choice. but had been allowed to escape as part of a long-term strategy to place her bloodline where it would be needed decades later. Elena was not a random variable in this conflict, but a carefully planted seed that had been waiting to sprout at precisely this moment. The knowledge that her mother's betrayal might have been orchestrated from the beginning left Elena reeling with questions about her own identity and purpose. King Valdric's transformation from grateful father to suspicious predator happened with the sudden violence of a summer storm, his crimson eyes blazing with fury as Lord Thorne's intelligence reports took on new and sinister meaning. Elena found herself dragged from Princess Lyralei's chambers by the castle guard, her protests falling on deaf ears as the vampire king's rage filled the corridors like poisonous fog. The royal dungeons beneath Drakmoor Castle had held prisoners for over 1,000 years, their stone walls stained with the suffering of countless souls who had dared to cross the vampire monarchy. Elena's cell was small and windowless, its only furnishing a straw pallet that reeked of despair and old blood. Iron manacles designed to suppress magical abilities were clamped around her wrists, their cold metal burning her skin with every movement. King Valdric appeared outside her cell like an avenging angel carved from marble and malice, his pale hands gripping the iron bars with enough force to leave permanent impressions in the metal. His voice was soft and deadly as he accused Elena of being a Shadowmere spy sent to complete her mother's work from within his own family. The timing of her arrival just weeks before Queen Morgatha's ultimatum seemed too convenient to be coincidental, and her success in partially breaking the curse had actually served the enemy's purposes by providing valuable intelligence. Elena's desperate protests of innocence fell on ears deafened by centuries of paranoia and the fresh sting of realizing how thoroughly he had been manipulated. King Valdric paced before her cell like a caged wolf, his rational mind warring with paternal instincts as he debated whether to execute her immediately or extract information through magical interrogation. Lord Thorne advised swift execution before Elena could somehow signal her Shadowmere handlers, but the king hesitated because his daughter had been happier in Elena's presence than she had been since the curse began. The vampire monarch found himself torn between protecting his kingdom from potential treachery and preserving the one thing that had brought his daughter comfort during her darkest hours. Elena spent 3 days in the dungeon while her fate was debated in the council chambers above, her magical abilities slowly weakening as the iron manacles drained her strength. She could feel Princess Lyralei's distress through their growing psychic connection, the princess's anguish at Elena's imprisonment adding new layers of torment to her existing suffering. The curse had grown stronger during Elena's absence, the remaining silver thorns pulsing with renewed vitality as they fed on both women's emotional pain. Elena realized that separating them was accelerating the princess's deterioration, but her warnings went unheeded by guards who had been ordered to treat her as a dangerous enemy agent. Princess Lyralei's condition deteriorated rapidly without Elena's stabilizing presence, her episodes of screaming agony returning with increased frequency and intensity. The vampire princess had grown dependent on Elena's healing energy not just for physical relief, but for the emotional support that made her suffering bearable. When she learned of Elena's imprisonment and impending execution, something fundamental shifted in her supernatural nature, her vampiric powers manifesting with unprecedented force. The princess broke free from her chambers with strength that surprised even her father's elite guards, her amber eyes blazing with desperate determination as she fought her way to the dungeons. Elena had never seen Princess Lyralei display such raw power, the curse's attempts to weaken her overwhelmed by the primal fury of someone protecting their beloved. The princess's rescue attempt became a revelation that changed everything when she confronted her father in Elena's dungeon cell, her voice cracking with emotion as she confessed the depth of her feelings. Elena had shown her what life beyond the castle walls could be like, painting pictures of a world where kindness mattered more than power, and where love could exist without political calculation. Princess Lyralei's admission that she had fallen in love with Elena transformed the confrontation from a matter of state security into something far more personal and painful. King Valdric watched his daughter's tear-streaked face as she pleaded for Elena's life, her usual composed demeanor shattered by the prospect of losing the first person who had ever loved her for herself rather than her royal status. The vampire king had spent centuries believing that love was a weakness that could be exploited by enemies, but seeing his daughter's genuine emotion forced him to reconsider his harsh judgment of Elena's motives. Princess Liralay's confession that Elena's humanity and compassion had given her hope for a future beyond the curse carried a weight that pure logic could not dismiss. King Valdric found himself face to face with the possibility that his suspicions were wrong, that Elena might be the key to saving not just his daughter's life, but her capacity for happiness. The sight of Princess Lirelay collapsed against Elena's cell door, her pale hands reaching through the bars to touch her beloved's face, created a tableau of such raw emotion that even the hardened dungeon guards looked away in discomfort. King Valdric realized that executing Elena would destroy his daughter's spirit, even if it somehow saved her body, leaving him with a living corpse rather than the vibrant young woman he remembered from before the curse. The Vampire King's worldview, built on centuries of calculated political maneuvering, began to crack as he witnessed love that transcended species, status, and the shadow of approaching doom. The great war drums of both vampire courts echoed across the blood-soaked borderlands as Elena hunted through Drakmoor Castle's ancient library for answers that might prevent the apocalypse bearing down upon them. King Valdric had released her from the dungeons with grudging acceptance of her genuine feelings for his daughter, but trust remained fragile as preparation for war consumed every corner of the castle. Elena's hands shook as she pulled dusty tomes from shelves that had not been disturbed for centuries, searching for any reference to her mother's true mission or methods that might break Morgatha's curse without triggering the final catastrophe. The library itself was a monument to vampire scholarship, its vaulted ceilings disappearing into shadows while magical torches provided just enough light to read by without destroying the precious ancient texts. Elena had always possessed an unusual talent for languages, another gift inherited from her sorceress mother, and she found herself able to decipher manuscripts written in dialects that predated modern civilization. It was in a journal bound in scales from some long-extinct creature that she discovered the truth about Seraphina's defection, a revelation that shattered everything she thought she knew about her family history. The journal belonged to a Shadowmere court historian who had documented Seraphina's original mission with clinical precision, describing how the young sorceress had been chosen specifically to infiltrate Drakmoor's defenses through her healing abilities and natural charisma. Seraphina was supposed to gather intelligence about vampire defensive magic, poison key members of the royal family, and create weaknesses that Shadowmere could exploit during the next major conflict. But the mission had gone catastrophically wrong when Seraphina fell in love with Elena's father, a human blacksmith whose gentle nature had awakened her dormant conscience and shown her the possibility of a life beyond Queen Morgatha's endless hunger for revenge. Elena read with growing amazement how her mother had gradually turned against her original handlers, feeding false information back to Shadowmere while secretly strengthening Drakmoor's magical defenses with subtle improvements that had saved thousands of lives during subsequent skirmishes. Seraphina's ultimate betrayal had been stealing the location of Shadowmere's primary ritual sites and passing them to King Valdric, enabling Drakmoor forces to disrupt magical operations that would have tipped the balance of power permanently in Morgatha's favor. The journal revealed that Elena inherited not just her mother's magical abilities, but also her sacred duty to protect the Drakmoor bloodline, a responsibility that had been woven into her very soul before birth through rituals performed by Seraphina during her pregnancy. Elena realized that her instinctive need to heal Princess Lirelay was not mere compassion, but a mystical compulsion that made her the princess's destined protector, a role that carried both tremendous power and terrible personal cost. The weight of this revelation pressed down on Elena like a physical burden, as she understood that her entire existence had been shaped by her mother's choices and Queen Morgatha's ancient vendetta against a family she had never met before arriving at Drakmoor Castle. Meanwhile, Princess Lirelei suffered through increasingly vivid nightmares that seemed less like dreams and more like prophetic visions of approaching doom. The curse had evolved beyond simple physical torture into something that attacked the princess's mind directly, forcing her to witness possible futures where Elena died horribly while trying to save her. These visions came with devastating clarity that left Lirelei screaming herself awake night after night, her vampire healing abilities overwhelmed by psychic trauma that cut deeper than any physical wound. Elena would find the princess huddled in her bed afterward, pale and shaking, as she described dreams of Elena withering away like a flower drained of life, her healing power consuming her mortal essence until nothing remained but empty skin and brittle bones. Other visions showed Elena struck down by Shadowmere assassins, her blood pooling on castle stones, while Princess Lirelei watched helplessly from behind bars forged from her own silver thorns. The most terrifying dreams depicted the fall of both kingdoms, their armies destroying each other in an endless war that turned the entire continent into a wasteland where the dead outnumbered the living. Princess Lirelei began to understand that the curse was not just killing her, but forcing her to experience every possible tragedy that might result from attempts to save her, a psychological torture designed to break her spirit and make her welcome death as the only escape from witnessing the destruction of everyone she loved. The prophetic quality of these nightmares became undeniable when details from the princess's dreams began manifesting in reality. From the exact positioning of Shadowmere scouts to the specific injuries suffered by Drakmoor soldiers during border skirmishes. Elena realized that the curse had infected the princess with a form of oracular sight that showed her all the ways their resistance might fail, transforming hope itself into an instrument of torment that made victory seem not just impossible, but actively harmful to pursue. Elena's magical awakening accelerated beyond anything she had imagined possible as desperation pushed her abilities to their absolute limits. But each use of her healing power extracted a price that she desperately tried to hide from Princess Lirelei. The half-blood sorceress could feel her mortal essence burning away like candle wax every time she channeled energy into fighting the curse, her human heritage providing the fuel that powered abilities inherited from her supernatural mother. Elena's reflection showed the cost more clearly each day, as her rich brown hair developed premature streaks of silver while fine lines appeared around her eyes that aged her beyond her 20 years. Her hands, once steady and strong from years of village labor, began to tremble with exhaustion that no amount of rest could cure. The healing sessions that brought Princess Lirelei temporary relief were slowly consuming Elena's life force, each attempt to break another silver thorn shortening her remaining time by weeks or months. Elena discovered this terrible truth through careful observation and study of ancient texts that described the dangers faced by mortal magic users who exceeded their natural limitations. Her mother's journals, hidden in the library's secret compartments, contained warnings about the specific risks faced by half-bloods who attempted to channel power levels meant for fully supernatural beings. Serafina had faced the same choice decades earlier, trading portions of her own lifespan to protect those she loved until the constant drain of healing magic left her vulnerable to the mob that eventually burned her as a witch. Elena realized that she was following in her mother's footsteps toward the same tragic end, but the knowledge could not diminish her determination to save Princess Lirelei, regardless of the personal cost. Princess Lirale discovered Elena's deteriorating condition through the heightened senses that came with her vampiric nature, noticing subtle changes in Elena's scent and the rhythm of her heartbeat that indicated severe physical stress. The confrontation that followed shattered both their hearts, as Elena was forced to admit the truth about her dying mortality, while Princess Lirale raged against the unfairness of a universe that demanded such sacrifices. The princess forbade Elena from attempting any further healing, declaring that she would rather die from the curse than watch the woman she loved waste away trying to save her. Their argument escalated into the first real fight of their relationship as Elena insisted that her life meant nothing compared to saving Princess Lirale, while the princess countered that living without Elena would be worse than death itself. The emotional intensity of their conflict caused the silver thorns to pulse with increased activity as the curse fed on their pain and desperation, turning their love into another weapon to be used against them. Elena's breaking point came when she confessed that Princess Lirale had shown her what love truly meant for the first time in her life, transforming her existence from mere survival into something worth dying for if necessary. The princess had given Elena a sense of purpose and belonging that she had never experienced during her lonely years as an orphan in a village that feared her heritage, making the prospect of sacrificing her shortened lifespan seem like a fair trade for the happiness she had found. Princess Lirale's tears fell like crystal drops as she understood that Elena's willingness to die was not reckless heroism, but the deepest expression of gratitude and devotion imaginable. King Valdric witnessed this heartbreaking exchange from the shadows outside his daughter's chamber, his centuries of emotional armor cracking as he finally understood the genuine nature of Elena's love for Princess Lirale. The Vampire King had spent so long viewing relationships through the lens of political advantage that he had forgotten love could exist without ulterior motives or hidden agendas. But watching Elena's willingness to sacrifice everything for his daughter's well-being forced him to confront his own capacity for such devotion. King Valdric realized that he and Elena were both trapped in Queen Morgatha's web of impossible choices. Their love for Princess Lirale transformed into the very weapon that would destroy them all. The king's newfound understanding of Elena's motivations came too late to prevent the greater catastrophe that was already in motion. But it marked the beginning of his acceptance that sometimes love required trust rather than suspicion, even when the stakes were the survival of an entire kingdom. Lord Thorne's betrayal struck like lightning from a clear sky when he revealed his true allegiance during what should have been a routine strategy meeting in King Valdric's private study. The ancient vampire had served as spy master for over 2 centuries, his loyalty beyond question until the moment he drew a blade forged from cursed silver and aimed it at Elena's heart with the precision of a practiced assassin. Elena's reflexes, honed by her awakening magical abilities, barely saved her as she threw herself backward while Lord Thorne's weapon carved through the air where her chest had been just moments before. The spy master's pale eyes blazed with fanatic devotion as he explained how Queen Morgatha had turned him decades ago through a combination of magical compulsion and carefully crafted arguments about the superiority of Shadowmere's vision for vampire civilization. Lord Thorne had been feeding information to Shadowmere agents throughout the current crisis, sabotaging attempts to break the curse by providing precise intelligence about Elena's capabilities and the royal family's emotional vulnerabilities. His treachery explained how Queen Morgatha had anticipated their every move and why the curse had adapted so quickly to their healing attempts, revealing that they had been fighting a rigged game from the very beginning. Elena realized with growing horror that Lord Thorne's betrayal went far deeper than simple espionage, extending back to his role in selecting servants who were allowed near Princess Lirale, and possibly even influencing the security arrangements that had allowed the princess to be cursed in the first place. King Valdric's rage at this ultimate betrayal transformed him into a creature of pure violence as he lunged at his former spy master with claws extended and fangs bared. But Lord Thorn had anticipated this reaction and countered with supernatural speed that matched the king's own vampiric abilities. The battle between the two ancient vampires shattered furniture and cracked stone walls as they fought with the fury of predators who had abandoned all pretense of civilization, their conflict spilling from the study into the corridors beyond, while castle guards scattered to avoid being caught in the crossfire. Elena found herself separated from Princess Lirelei during the chaos as Lord Thorn's assassination attempt triggered magical alarms throughout the castle, but she could hear the princess's screams of agony echoing from her chambers as the curse reacted violently to the emotional turmoil surrounding it. Lord Thorn's plan became clear as Elena realized he was trying to kill her, not just to serve Queen Morgatha, but to trigger a massive flare-up of the curse that would accelerate Princess Lirelei's transformation into Shadowmere's puppet. The treacherous spy master had calculated that Elena's death would cause such psychological trauma to the princess that the remaining silver thorns would complete their work within hours rather than days, delivering victory to Queen Morgatha while making it appear that the curse had simply reached its natural conclusion. Elena raced toward Princess Lirelei's chambers while the sounds of vampiric combat echoed behind her, knowing that Lord Thorn's backup plan involved using magical explosives to bring down the entire wing of the castle if his direct assassination attempt failed. Princess Lirelei's vampiric powers manifested with unprecedented force when she sensed Elena's mortal danger, the princess's protective instincts overriding the curse's attempts to weaken her as she broke free from her chambers with enough strength to shatter reinforced doors like kindling. Elena arrived to find Princess Lirelei standing over Lord Thorn's broken form, her amber eyes blazing with inhuman fury while her fingers dripped with the traitor's blood. But the effort of protecting Elena had triggered exactly the reaction that Lord Thorn had hoped to achieve. The silver thorns across Princess Lirelei's scalp flared with brilliant light as the curse interpreted her emotional outburst as an opportunity to accelerate its final phase. The magical parasites beginning to burrow deeper into her brain, while waves of agony dropped her to her knees in convulsions that threatened to tear her apart from within. Elena watched in helpless terror as the woman she loved began dying in real time, the curse no longer content to work slowly, but racing toward completion with mechanical inevitability that made every second precious beyond measure. Lord Thorn's final act of treachery had been to force them into the exact situation Queen Morgatha desired, leaving Elena with no choice but to attempt a desperate healing that would either save Princess Lirelei or kill them both in the process, while King Valdric's roars of fury provided a soundtrack to the collapse of everything they had fought to preserve. King Valdric's revelation about the ancient blood pact came in the desperate hours after Lord Thorn's betrayal, when Princess Lirelei lay dying from the curse's accelerated assault, and conventional solutions had proven utterly inadequate. The Vampire King summoned Elena to his private vault deep beneath the castle, a chamber that had remained sealed for over 500 years and contained artifacts from the earliest days of vampire civilization. Among the treasures and weapons of forgotten wars sat a crystalline tablet covered in runes that seemed to shift and writhe when viewed directly, its surface pulsing with malevolent energy that made Elena's teeth ache just from proximity. King Valdric's voice carried the weight of centuries as he explained how the Blood Pact had been created during the First Great War between vampire courts, designed as a last resort when magical conflicts threatened to destroy both kingdoms entirely. The ritual allowed curses and magical bonds to be transferred between individuals who shared specific bloodline connections, but the process required willing sacrifice from representatives of both warring factions. Elena's breath caught as she realized that her mother's original service to Shadowmere made her eligible to serve as their bloodline representative, her magical heritage carrying the mystical resonance needed to complete the ancient working. The terrible beauty of the blood pact lay in its perfect balance between salvation and damnation, offering to break Princess Liralay's curse at the cost of binding Elena to Queen Morgatha's will instead. Elena would become Shadowmere's unwilling servant, her powerful healing abilities turned into weapons against the very people she sought to protect. King Valdric's hands shook as he described the ritual's requirements, his voice breaking as he admitted that he was asking Elena to sacrifice everything she was to save his daughter. The vampire king had exhausted every other option, consulted with the greatest magical scholars in his kingdom, and concluded that the blood pact represented their only hope of breaking Morgatha's curse before it consumed Princess Lirelei completely. Elena stared at the crystalline tablet while her mind raced through the implications of such a choice, understanding that accepting would mean losing not just her freedom, but potentially her entire moral identity as Queen Morgatha's magical compulsions took hold. The ritual itself was complex beyond imagination, requiring precise timing, specific incantations in languages that predated written history, and the voluntary surrender of her will at the moment of mystical bonding. Elena would need to cut her palm with a blade forged from Shadowmere silver while speaking words that would sever her connection to her current loyalties and forge new ones to Morgatha's court. The process was irreversible once begun, making this decision one that would echo through whatever remained of Elena's existence long after the current crisis passed. King Valdric's desperation was palpable as he waited for Elena's answer, his ancient pride warring with paternal love as he begged a mortal girl to save his daughter through ultimate self-sacrifice. Elena's acceptance came without hesitation, despite understanding the full cost, her love for Princess Lirelei overriding every instinct for self-preservation as she agreed to undergo the blood pact ritual. The preparations took hours as they gathered the necessary components and studied the ancient instructions. Elena memorizing incantations, while King Valdric prepared the ritual chamber with protective wards designed to contain the massive magical energies that would be unleashed. Princess Lirelei remained unconscious through most of these preparations, her condition deteriorating steadily as the silver thorns burrowed deeper into her brain and the curse approached its final phase. Elena spent precious time sitting beside the princess's bed, holding her cold hand while whispering promises about a future they would never share, knowing that this might be their last peaceful moment together. The ritual chamber itself was a circular room carved from living rock, its walls covered in murals depicting the original vampire wars and the terrible prices paid for magical power. Elena and Princess Lirelei shared what they both knew would be their final night together as Elena prepared to sacrifice her freedom for love, their conversation a bittersweet mixture of desperate passion and heartbreaking farewell. Princess Lirelei begged Elena to reconsider, arguing that living as Morgatha's slave would be worse than death, and that she would rather die free than be saved at such a cost. Elena's response was gentle but implacable, explaining that Princess Lirelei had given her life meaning and purpose that made any sacrifice worthwhile, even one that would transform her into something unrecognizable. They made love with the desperate intensity of people facing eternity apart, every touch and whisper carrying the weight of finality as they tried to memorize each other's essence, before the ritual changed everything forever. Queen Morgatha's assault on Drakmoor Castle began at dawn with a fury that shook the ancient foundations and sent shockwaves through the surrounding countryside, her patience finally exhausted by Elena's interference with her carefully laid plans. The Shadowmere forces struck from multiple directions simultaneously, their vampire warriors moving with supernatural speed while siege engines hurled magical projectiles that exploded against Drakmoor's protective wards like falling stars. Elena could hear the sounds of battle echoing through the castle's corridors as she and Princess Lirelei raced toward the ritual chamber, knowing that Queen Morgatha had timed her attack to prevent them from completing the blood pact before the curse finished its work. The ancient sorceress had brought her entire court to this final confrontation, centuries of accumulated magical power focused on crushing Drakmoor's defenses and claiming Princess Lirelei as her prize. Elena's powers had reached their full awakening under the pressure of desperate circumstances, allowing her to shield Princess Lirelei from magical attacks while they navigated corridors filled with smoke and falling debris. Her healing abilities had evolved beyond simple restoration to encompass protective barriers and energy manipulation that rivaled the techniques of trained war mages. Elena found herself fighting alongside Drakmoor's defenders, her golden healing light clashing against Shadowmere's crimson battle magic as she carved a path toward their destination. Princess Lirelei's vampiric strength had been partially restored by Elena's constant healing efforts, allowing her to move under her own power, despite the silver thorns that continued to drain her life force with every heartbeat. The curse had reached a critical phase where its magical signature was visible to anyone with supernatural senses, making Princess Lirelei a beacon that drew Shadowmere assassins like moths to a flame. Elena deflected attacks meant for the princess while maintaining the delicate magical balance needed to keep the curse from completing its work before they could reach the ritual chamber. The castle itself seemed to be fighting against them as Queen Morgatha's magic corrupted the ancient protective spells, turning friendly enchantments into hostile forces that blocked their progress with animated suits of armor and weapons that attacked without wielders. Elena's understanding of magical theory, inherited from her mother's memories, allowed her to counter many of these obstacles by identifying the specific spells being used and crafting appropriate defenses. The running battle through Drakmoor's halls tested every aspect of Elena's newfound abilities as she was forced to heal wounded defenders, shield Princess Lirelei from curses, and maintain offensive capabilities, all while preserving enough strength for the blood-pact ritual that awaited them. King Valdric appeared at critical moments during their journey, his royal vampire powers devastating Shadowmere forces that threatened to overwhelm Elena's defenses. But even he could not be everywhere at once, as the enemy's superior numbers began to tell. The ritual chamber's location deep within the castle's heart had been chosen specifically to provide maximum protection during magical workings, but the journey there became a gauntlet of supernatural combat that pushed Elena beyond her previous limits. Princess Lirelei's condition continued to worsen throughout their desperate flight, the curse accelerating its timetable as it sensed the approaching completion of the blood pact ritual that would free its victim from Shadowmere's control. Elena could feel the princess's life force ebbing with each passing minute, her vampiric regeneration failing to keep pace with the mystical drain imposed by the silver thorns that had become instruments of slow execution. The sounds of Queen Morgatha's approach echoed through the castle as the ancient sorceress personally led her forces toward the ritual chamber, her magical presence strong enough to make the very stones tremble with anticipation of the final confrontation. Elena realized that they would have only minutes to complete the blood pact before Morgatha arrived to stop them, the ritual's requirements for absolute stillness and concentration seeming impossible to achieve while a battle raged around them. The blood pact ritual began in the circular chamber as Elena cut her palm with the Shadowmere silver blade, her blood falling onto the crystalline tablet while ancient words of binding poured from her lips in languages that predated human civilization. Princess Lirelei lay on the altar at the chamber's center, her body racked with convulsions as the curse sensed the approaching threat to its existence and redoubled its efforts to complete the mental domination that would make her Morgatha's puppet. Elena's voice grew stronger as she progressed through the incantations, her magical heritage allowing her to pronounce the archaic syllables with perfect accuracy, despite having learned them only hours before. The chamber filled with swirling energies as the blood pact responded to her words, crimson and gold light dancing around the altar, while reality itself seemed to bend under the pressure of competing magical forces. Elena could feel her connection to her current life beginning to fray as the ritual prepared to sever her bonds to everything she had ever known. But her determination never wavered as she focused on saving the woman she loved above all else. Princess Liralay's amber eyes opened during the ritual's climax, her gaze meeting Elena's with perfect understanding as they shared what both believed would be their final moment of true connection. The curse fought against the Blood Pact's influence with increasing desperation, the silver thorns flaring with brilliant light as they attempted to complete their work before the transfer could be accomplished. Elena's shocking discovery came as the ritual reached its peak, and the true nature of the Blood Pact revealed itself through mystical revelation that rewrote everything she thought she understood about the ancient magic. The transformation would not destroy her humanity through mental enslavement, but would instead change her fundamental nature by making her a vampire, granting immortality while binding her to Princess Lirelei through mystical bonds stronger than Morgatha's curse. Elena realized that the Blood Pact was designed to create eternal partnerships between vampire bloodlines, forging connections that transcended individual courts and loyalties through shared supernatural existence. The revelation struck Princess Lirelei with equal force, as she understood that saving her life would cost Elena the humanity that had made their love so precious, transforming the mortal girl into something fundamentally different from the person who had brought light into her dark world. Princess Liralei's anguish at this realization threatened to disrupt the ritual as she begged Elena to stop, arguing that she would rather die as herself than live knowing she had forced Elena to abandon her mortal nature. Elena's response carried the weight of absolute conviction, as she declared that becoming a vampire to save Princess Lirelei was not a sacrifice, but a privilege, the chance to spend eternity with the woman who had given her life meaning. Queen Morgatha's dramatic entrance into the ritual chamber came at the precise moment when the Blood Pact reached the point of no return, her crimson eyes blazing with fury as she realized how thoroughly her plans had been thwarted by love and determination. The ancient sorceress unleashed her full power against the ritual circle, seeking to disrupt the magical working before it could complete Elena's transformation and break the curse that had taken decades to perfect. Elena faced the ultimate choice as Morgatha's attack threatened to tear the chamber apart, knowing that completing the ritual would save Princess Lirelei, but forever change her own nature while failing to complete it would doom them both to fates worse than death. The decision came without hesitation, as Elena poured the last of her mortal strength into the Blood Pact, accepting transformation as the price of love, while Princess Lirelei's tears fell like crystal drops onto the altar that would remake their destiny. Elena's transformation completed itself in a cascade of golden and crimson light as Queen Morgatha's fury shattered the ritual chamber's ancient stones, the Blood Pact sealing Elena's new vampiric nature while simultaneously transferring the curse from Princess Lirelei to her own supernatural essence. The moment of change brought revelations that flooded Elena's consciousness, with memories inherited from her mother, and glimpses of power that transcended anything she had imagined possible. Elena's mixed bloodline, combining human compassion with sorceress abilities, and now enhanced by vampire immortality, created something unprecedented in the magical world. A hybrid being capable of containing forces that would destroy pure vampires or mortals alike. The silver thorns materialized across Elena's scalp as the curse completed its transfer. But instead of the agonizing torment that had plagued Princess Lirelei, Elena felt only a cold pressure as her unique nature began systematically neutralizing the malevolent magic. Queen Morgatha's entrance had come too late to prevent the ritual's completion, but her rage at this final failure transformed her into something beyond reason or restraint. Her centuries of careful planning reduced to ashes by a mortal girl's willingness to sacrifice everything for love. The ancient sorceress stood in the ruined doorway like an avatar of destruction, her crimson eyes blazing with power accumulated over millennia, while her pale hands crackled with energies capable of reducing mountains to dust. Elena rose from the altar on unsteady legs, her newly enhanced senses overwhelming her with input as she adjusted to perception that could detect individual heartbeats throughout the castle and magical currents flowing like rivers through the air around her. Princess Lirelei collapsed in relief as the last silver thorn vanished from her scalp. Her vampiric healing finally able to work unimpeded, as months of accumulated damage began reversing itself with supernatural speed. Queen Morgatha's challenge to single combat rang through the chamber with the force of a divine pronouncement, her voice carrying compulsions that would have forced any normal vampire to accept, regardless of their chances of survival. Elena's acceptance came not from magical compulsion, but from understanding that Morgatha would never stop hunting Princess Lirelei unless their conflict was settled definitively, making this duel the only path to true peace for everyone she loved. The ancient sorceress launched herself forward with speed that blurred the line between movement and teleportation, her claws extending into weapons capable of carving through steel, while Elena barely managed to dodge the first strike that left gouges in the stone floor. Elena's vampiric reflexes were still developing, her supernatural speed hampered by lack of experience as she stumbled through combat techniques that Morgatha had perfected over centuries of warfare. The battle spilled from the ritual chamber into the castle's main corridors as Elena retreated before Morgatha's relentless assault, her sorceress abilities providing the only advantage against an opponent whose vampiric powers far exceeded her own. Elena discovered that her healing magic had evolved during the transformation, no longer limited to restoration, but capable of disrupting hostile enchantments and creating barriers of pure energy that could deflect even Morgatha's most devastating attacks. The duel ascended through Drakmoor Castle's levels as Elena sought higher ground where her magical abilities might compensate for Morgatha's superior physical prowess, their conflict leaving a trail of destruction that would take years to repair. Servants and soldiers fled before the fighting vampires, their mortal minds unable to process movement and magic that exceeded human comprehension, while the very walls groaned under the pressure of competing supernatural forces. Elena's inexperience with vampiric combat was balanced by her intuitive understanding of magical theory, allowing her to anticipate Morgatha's spells and counter them with techniques inherited from her mother's memories. The siege continued to rage around the castle as Shadowmere and Drakmoor forces clashed in the courtyards below, their battle providing a soundtrack of death and destruction that emphasized the stakes of Elena's personal duel with their queen. Elena reached the castle's highest tower as Morgatha's pursuit drove her ever upward, the ancient structure swaying under the impact of magical forces that threatened to bring the entire edifice crashing down. The circular chamber at the tower's peak had once served as an observatory, its windows offering panoramic views of the battlefield below, where vampire armies destroyed each other with mechanical efficiency. Elena's powers reached new heights as desperation and love combined to unlock abilities she had never suspected, her golden healing light transforming into weapons of stunning beauty and terrible effectiveness. Queen Morgatha's centuries of experience showed as she adapted to Elena's unpredictable fighting style, her attacks becoming more precise and deadly as she learned to counter the hybrid's unique combination of vampiric strength and sorceress versatility. Elena's revelation about Queen Morgatha's true nature came through inherited memories that surfaced during their brutal combat, visions from her mother's time in Shadowmere that revealed the ancient curse, binding the sorceress queen to eternal vengeance. The knowledge hit Elena like physical blow as she realized that Morgatha was not acting from pure malice, but from mystical compulsion that had driven her actions for over 3 centuries, transforming a wronged woman into an avatar of endless retribution. Elena could see through her enhanced vampiric perception, the chains of magical obligation wrapped around Morgatha's essence like parasitic vines, feeding on her pain and anger while forcing her to pursue revenge against the Drakmoor bloodline, regardless of her own desires or the cost to her kingdom. The original betrayal had occurred during the reign of King Valdric's grandfather, when a diplomatic marriage between Morgatha and the Drakmoor heir had been arranged to cement peace between the vampire courts for the first time in their violent history. Elena's mother's memories showed the younger Morgatha as someone capable of love and mercy, a brilliant sorceress who had genuinely hoped that marriage alliance might end the centuries of warfare that had devastated both kingdoms. The betrayal came when Prince Aldrich of Drakmoor fell in love with a human noblewoman and broke the engagement publicly, humiliating Morgatha before both courts, while destroying the peace negotiations that had taken decades to arrange. Elena saw through Seraphina's eyes how the rejection had shattered something fundamental in Morgatha's nature, her pain and humiliation providing the emotional fuel for a curse that bound her to seek revenge until the Drakmoor bloodline was completely destroyed. The magical binding had been Morgatha's own creation, forged in a moment of absolute despair when death seemed preferable to living with the shame of such public rejection and the collapse of her dreams for lasting peace. Elena realized that the sorceress queen had trapped herself in an endless cycle of vengeance, her own magic preventing her from finding satisfaction or release no matter how many victories she achieved against Drakmoor forces. The curse had grown stronger over the centuries, feeding on Morgatha's accumulated bitterness and transforming her into something barely recognizable as the woman who had once hoped to heal the divisions between vampire courts through love rather than conquest. Elena's understanding of the situation transformed her approach to their battle as she stopped trying to defeat Morgatha through superior force and instead sought to break the curse that enslaved them both to this conflict. The fighting paused as Elena spoke the words that changed everything, offering Queen Morgatha something no one had provided in 3 centuries of warfare: genuine understanding of her pain and the possibility of forgiveness for actions driven by mystical compulsion rather than free choice. Elena's compassion reached through Morgatha's rage like sunlight piercing storm clouds, touching the woman buried beneath centuries of enforced hatred and offering her the chance to choose mercy over revenge for the first time since the curse took hold. The ancient sorceress hesitated as Elena's words awakened memories of who she had been before betrayal, and magic transformed her into an instrument of eternal vengeance. Her crimson eyes flickering with confusion as the possibility of freedom warred against the compulsions that had defined her existence. Elena pressed her advantage by offering to help break Morgatha's curse through the same blood-pact magic that had freed Princess Lirelei, using her unique nature as a bridge between vampire courts to forge new connections based on healing rather than harm. The moment stretched between them like a held breath, as Queen Morgatha wrestled with choices she had not been free to make for longer than most kingdoms had existed, her ancient features cycling through emotions too complex for any single expression to contain. Queen Morgatha's choice to break the cycle of vengeance came with tears that seemed to crystallize in the air around her, each drop carrying the weight of centuries spent trapped in hatred that had never truly been her own. The ancient sorceress reached toward Elena with hands that trembled for the first time in 300 years, her voice breaking as she spoke words of forgiveness that the curse had never allowed her to consider. Elena felt the moment of transformation as Morgatha's curse began unraveling, the magical chains that had bound the sorceress queen to endless revenge dissolving under the power of conscious choice and genuine mercy. The process required tremendous sacrifice as Morgatha channeled her accumulated magical power into reversing not just the curse on Elena, but the deeper enchantments that had poisoned relations between vampire courts for generations. Elena watched in awe as the silver thorns across her scalp began dissolving one by one, each vanishing thorn releasing waves of healing energy that spread throughout Drakmoor Castle like ripples in a pond. Queen Morgatha's efforts extended beyond simple curse-breaking to encompass fundamental changes in the magical forces that governed vampire society, her final act of magic designed to prevent future conflicts by removing the mystical barriers that had made peace impossible between their peoples. The sorceress queen's life force poured out like water from a broken vessel as she used every remaining fragment of her immortal essence to heal damage that went back to the founding of both vampire courts. Her centuries of accumulated power flowing into spells of reconciliation and restoration. Elena reached out to catch Morgatha as the ancient vampire collapsed, her body already beginning to crumble as the magic that had sustained her for so long found new purpose in breaking, rather than perpetuating cycles of violence. Queen Morgatha's final words carried the wisdom of someone finally freed from the prison of her own making. Her advice to Elena about the responsibility that came with bridging supernatural societies and the importance of choosing love over power at every opportunity. The Sorceress Queen's death was peaceful in a way that her life had not been for centuries, her features softening as the curse's corruption left her face and revealed glimpses of the woman she had been before. Betrayal transformed her into an instrument of vengeance. Elena felt the profound silence that followed Morgatha's passing, a stillness that extended beyond the tower to encompass both armies, as the magical compulsions driving their conflict suddenly vanished like smoke in strong wind. The transformation in Elena was complete, as the last traces of the curse left her system, leaving her with vampire immortality and sorceress abilities, while preserving the human compassion that had made her intervention possible in the first place. Princess Lyrelay appeared in the tower chamber as the battle ended, her amber eyes wide with wonder as she took in the scene of Elena cradling Queen Morgatha's peaceful remains while magical energy continued to flow from the sorceress's final spell. Elena's new nature was immediately apparent in her enhanced beauty and the way light seemed to gather around her like visible grace. But Princess Lyrelay's relief at seeing her beloved alive was tempered by uncertainty about whether Elena's transformation had preserved the essential qualities that had made their love so precious. The question that hung between them required no words as Princess Lyrelay searched Elena's face for signs of the humanity that had first drawn her heart, looking for the kindness and warmth that had made a sheltered vampire princess dream of life beyond castle walls. Elena's smile carried all the reassurance that Princess Lyrelay needed, her expression radiating the same gentle compassion that had made her risk everything to heal a stranger's pain, proving that transformation had enhanced rather than diminished her capacity for love. The reunion between the two women was witnessed by King Valdric, who arrived to find his daughter embracing Elena, while Queen Morgatha's peaceful death marked the end of a conflict that had defined both their kingdoms for longer than mortal civilizations typically endured. Elena's role as a bridge between vampire courts was already beginning as representatives from both armies approached under improvised flags of truce, their previous compulsion to fight replaced by genuine curiosity about the hybrid being who had accomplished what centuries of warfare could not. Princess Lyrelay's acceptance of Elena's transformed nature came through touch as much as words, her vampiric senses confirming that the woman she loved remained fundamentally unchanged despite her supernatural evolution. The dawn that broke over Drakmoor Castle illuminated a world where ancient enemies knelt together in mourning for their fallen queen, while celebrating the possibility of lasting peace forged through sacrifice and love rather than conquest and hatred. 6 months after Queen Morgatha's death transformed the political landscape of both vampire kingdoms, Elena found herself standing in the great hall of Drakmoor Castle as representatives from both courts gathered for their first formal peace negotiations in over 3 centuries. Her unique nature as a vampire sorceress hybrid with retained human empathy had made her the ideal bridge between societies that had known only warfare and mistrust for generations beyond memory. Elena's diplomatic abilities had proven as valuable as her magical powers during the delicate process of rebuilding relationships shattered by endless conflict, her understanding of both supernatural and mortal perspectives, allowing her to translate concepts that would have been incomprehensible to pure-blooded vampires from either court. Princess Lyrelay stood beside her as they welcomed delegations whose ancestors had spent lifetimes dreaming of each other's destruction, The princess's transformation from cursed victim to confident leader, remarkable to witness as she embraced responsibilities that would have seemed impossible during her months of suffering. Their relationship had evolved far beyond the desperate love born from shared trauma and mortal danger, deepening into something built on daily choice and mutual respect as they discovered who they were when not fighting for survival. Elena's vampiric transformation had enhanced, rather than diminished, her capacity for growth, her immortal nature allowing her to pursue knowledge and skills that would take lifetimes to master, while her sorceress abilities continued expanding in directions that surprised even ancient magical scholars. The peace negotiations themselves were intricate dances of protocol and careful language, with Elena serving as translator not just between different vampire dialects, but between fundamentally different worldviews shaped by centuries of hostility. Princess Liralay's contributions to the diplomatic process revealed political acumen inherited from her royal bloodline, her insights into both kingdoms' needs and fears proving invaluable as they crafted agreements designed to last for millennia rather than mere decades. Elena discovered that her mother's memories, more accessible since her transformation, contained detailed knowledge about historical grievances and forgotten alliances that helped explain current tensions while suggesting pathways toward genuine reconciliation. King Valdric watched these proceedings with the pride of a father, seeing his daughter become the leader he had always hoped she might be. But his attention focused equally on Elena, whose influence had transformed not just Princess Lirelay, but the entire kingdom through her example of compassion combined with strength. The Vampire King's offer came during a private audience in his study, the same chamber where Lord Thorne's betrayal had been revealed months earlier, but now filled with hope rather than suspicion, as he formally requested that Elena accept the position of official consort to his heir. Elena's response carried the weight of careful consideration, as she explained that her acceptance would depend not on royal tradition, but on Princess Liralay's own desires and the needs of the people they hoped to serve together. The formalization of their relationship through royal recognition represented more than personal happiness, creating a symbolic union between different forms of supernatural existence that could serve as a model for future cooperation between diverse magical communities. Princess Liralay's joy at Elena's acceptance was evident in the way her amber eyes blazed with happiness that had become her natural state since the curse's removal, her laughter echoing through castle corridors that had known too much sorrow for too many years. Elena's integration into Drakmoor's royal family brought changes that rippled through every level of vampire society. Her insistence on treating servants with respect and her interest in the welfare of common citizens, introducing concepts that had been foreign to aristocratic vampires for centuries. The preparations for their official bonding ceremony became a celebration that would unite not just two individuals, but two entire kingdoms, in recognition that their shared future depended on cooperation rather than conquest. Elena's diplomatic success extended beyond formal negotiations to include cultural exchanges that allowed vampires from both courts to discover commonalities that had been obscured by generations of propaganda and mistrust. Princess Lirelay threw herself into these cultural initiatives with enthusiasm that revealed her genuine desire to heal wounds that went far deeper than political disagreements. Her personal transformation from isolated princess to engaged leader inspiring similar changes throughout both kingdoms. The bonding ceremony between Elena and Princess Lirelay took place in Drakmoor Castle's Great Hall, transformed for the occasion into a space that honored traditions from both vampire courts while creating new customs appropriate to their unprecedented union. Representatives from Shadowmere and Drakmoor mingled freely for the first time in living memory, their interactions tentative but genuine as they discovered that their supposed enemies were individuals with hopes and fears remarkably similar to their own. Elena wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved despite the years of hiding and exile, its simple elegance enhanced by magical embroidery that seemed to shift and flow in response to her hybrid nature. Princess Liralay's gown was a masterwork of vampire craftsmanship, deep midnight blue silk accented with silver threads that caught the light like captured starshine, her natural beauty enhanced by the joy that had become her constant companion since Elena's arrival in her life. The ceremony itself blended ancient vampire traditions with innovations designed to reflect their unique circumstances, including vows spoken in languages that predated both kingdoms and magical bindings that would connect their souls across whatever challenges eternity might bring. Elena's use of her mother's ring during the vow exchange created an unexpected moment of discovery when the simple gold band began glowing with magical energy that revealed hidden enchantments woven into its seemingly ordinary structure. The ring's transformation exposed intricate engravings previously invisible to mortal eyes, symbols and maps that appeared to indicate the locations of other sanctuaries where half-blood magic users like Elena might have found refuge over the centuries. Princess Liralay's vampiric vision allowed her to read details that would have been microscopic to normal sight, her excited whispers to Elena during their own ceremony, creating a moment of wonder that the gathered witnesses would remember for years to come. The revelation that Elena was likely not the only half-blood sorceress in existence transformed their wedding day into the beginning of a new quest, the possibility of finding others like her, adding urgency to their plans for travel beyond the vampire kingdoms. Elena's examination of the ring's hidden features revealed what appeared to be a comprehensive network of safe houses and magical sanctuaries spanning the entire known world, suggesting that her mother's escape from Shadowmere had been part of a much larger underground organization devoted to protecting supernatural refugees. Princess Liralay's excitement at the prospect of adventure matched Elena's own curiosity about others who might share her unique heritage, their honeymoon plans evolving from simple travel into a mission of discovery that could reshape their understanding of magical society. The bonding ceremony concluded with traditional vampire blood sharing, a ritual that deepened their mystical connection while allowing Elena's hybrid nature to enhance Princess Liralay's own magical abilities in subtle but significant ways. The celebration that followed lasted 3 days and included entertainment from both courts, creating cultural fusion that produced new forms of art and music that would influence vampire society for generations. King Valdric's blessing of their union carried the weight of royal approval, but also personal happiness, as he witnessed his daughter's transformation into someone capable of changing the world through love rather than conquest. Elena's integration into vampire nobility was complete when she received formal recognition from Shadowmere's new leadership, representatives who had traveled specifically to acknowledge her role in ending Queen Morgatha's curse and creating possibilities for lasting peace. The mystery of the ring's hidden map created excitement that extended beyond the immediate royal family to include scholars and adventurers from both courts who volunteered to assist in locating and contacting other half-blood communities. Princess Liralay's proposal that they begin their search immediately after the wedding festivities reflected her newfound confidence and desire to use their privileged position to help others who might be facing persecution or isolation. Elena's acceptance of this quest marked the beginning of a new chapter in both their lives as they prepared to leave the safety of Drakmoor Castle for adventures that would test not just their magical abilities, but their commitment to extending the healing they had brought to vampire society. Elena's hand moved through Princess Liralay's dark hair with the gentle confidence that came from knowing every strand was finally free from the silver thorns that had once made such simple intimacy impossible. The morning light streaming through stained glass windows painting rainbow patterns across the stone floor where instruments of torture had once fallen like metal rain. Their private chambers in Drakmoor Castle had been transformed from a place of suffering into a sanctuary filled with maps and travel plans as they prepared for the journey that would take them beyond the vampire kingdoms in search of others who shared Elena's unique heritage. Princess Liralay's hair had grown back thick and lustrous after months of healing, its midnight darkness contrasting beautifully with Elena's own transformed appearance as vampiric enhancement had given her features an ethereal quality that still retained the warmth and humanity that had first captured the princess's heart. Elena's touch was steady with supernatural strength, but infinitely gentle as she worked through tangles created by their enthusiastic planning session that had lasted well into the dawn hours. Their excitement at the prospect of adventure making sleep seemed like a waste of precious time. The sound of children playing in the castle gardens drifted through their window, voices raised in laughter, and games that had not been heard within Drakmoor's walls for over a century, as the peace between vampire courts had allowed families to flourish, without fear of constant warfare. Elena smiled as she recognized the voices of both vampire and human children whose parents had found new hope in the changing world, their innocent joy serving as proof that love could indeed conquer the ancient darkness that had divided their society for so long. Princess Lirelei stretched luxuriously under Elena's ministrations, her amber eyes soft with contentment as she outlined their planned route to the first sanctuary indicated on the ring's magical map, a location hidden deep within the mountains that separated vampire territories from human kingdoms. Elena's vampiric senses allowed her to detect the subtle changes in Princess Lyralei's scent and breathing that indicated her beloved's excitement at the prospect of seeing the world beyond castle walls. Adventures that had been impossible during her cursed existence, but now beckoned with unlimited possibilities. The morning routine of brushing hair had become a sacred ritual between them, a daily reminder of how far they had traveled from those desperate early days when every touch brought agony and hope seemed like a cruel impossibility. Princess Lyralei's transformation from isolated victim to confident adventurer was evident in the way she planned their expedition with military precision, her royal education in strategy and logistics proving invaluable as they prepared for challenges that would test both their magical abilities and their relationship. Elena's own evolution from desperate village refugee to vampire nobility still amazed her when she caught glimpses of herself in mirrors, her reflection showing someone who had found not just love, but purpose that extended far beyond personal happiness. The correspondence they had received from vampire courts across the continent indicated that their story had spread far beyond the immediate kingdoms, inspiring other supernatural communities to reconsider their own traditions and prejudices in light of what love and sacrifice could accomplish. Princess Lyralei's suggestion that they establish a network of communication between the various half-blood sanctuaries reflected her understanding that their quest was about more than personal discovery, potentially creating connections that could reshape magical society on a global scale. Elena's acceptance of this expanded mission came naturally as she recognized that her unique nature carried responsibilities that went beyond her own happiness or even the welfare of individual kingdoms. The morning light continued to shift through the stained glass as they planned and dreamed together, their combined shadow falling across maps and documents that would guide them toward adventures that would test everything they had learned about love, power, and the courage required to change an ancient world. Princess Lyralei's final kiss before they rose to begin their preparations carried the promise of shared adventures that would span centuries, their immortal love now free to explore possibilities that mortals could only dream about while making the world a better place for all supernatural beings who had been forced to hide or suffer in isolation.